How's it going, Metalheads? And welcome to another video. Today we are going to be discussing everything Judas Priest, from the history to where they are now, to their place in metal, to what I think about him, to what everybody else thinks about him, all this stuff. So let's get started. If you don't know Judas Priest, which I don't think that anybody who finds my channel is going to not know them, they've sold over 50 million records. They're one of the biggest metal bands of all time. But if you don't know them, go check them out. Although I really don't think there's going to be anybody watching this that doesn't know Judas Priest. That being said, if you don't know them, go check them out. They were formed in Birmingham, England, in 1969. Birmingham is also can't talk today. Often credited as one of the the birthplaces of metal, if not the birthplace of metal. It's also where Black Sabbath is from. They were a huge influence on a lot of bands. They formed in 1969 with original singer Al Atkins and a bunch of other people that are not in the band anymore. They formed in 1969, and then they recorded a 2-song demo, but then they split up in 1970 when they couldn't find success. And then later in 1970, original singer Al Atkins found a rock band called Freight rehearsing, and they didn't have a singer. It was made up of K.K. Downing on guitars, Ian Hill on bass, and a drummer named John Ellis. So he joined them, and Freight changed its name to Judas Priest, and this is the Judas Priest that we now know. A lot of their early gigs included covers, and a bunch of members came and went in that time. Soon after forming, they joined the management agency of Black Sabbath guitarist Tony Iommi. And eventually they were able to get into the studio in 1974 with Roger Bain, who was the producer working with Black Sabbath at the time, and they released their first single, Rock-A-Rolla, in that August of 1974, and then followed up September with Rock-A-Rolla the album, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. So, yes, I do feel like Rock-A-Rolla is a little bit of a low point in terms of their discography now, considering what they've done with everything else, but it still holds up, I think, and the fact that it's 50 years old now is really cool. So then they went on to record some Sad Wings of Destiny after that, and then Sin After Sin and Stained Class and Killing Machines when they really started gaining traction. So with that being said, let's talk about discography and what I think of each of the albums and things like that. So obviously Rock-A-Rolla is a low point for me. I feel like they didn't start to gain traction with that one yet, and it's not one of my favorites, but it's important because it's the debut, it's the first one, and it's 50 years old now, so let's celebrate that. Sad Wings of Destiny was after that. There's a few good tracks on that, like Genocide and The Ripper, but it's still not one of my favorites. I feel like I said, they really started to develop like late 70s, early 80s. Sin After Sin, I do like some deep cuts like Starbreaker and Dissonant Aggressor, but at the same time, like I said, Killing Machine is when they really started to take off. Killing Machine or Hellbent for Leather, I don't think needs any more explanation. That's the kind of the record that they blew up with. It's got Hellbent for Leather, the title track, and also The Green Manalishi with Two Prong Crown, which is a Fleetwood Mac cover. It's phenomenal. You should go listen to it. British Steel came in 1980, and that's when Priest really blew in the mainstream with tracks like Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight. That's a pretty good album. I think that it's definitely the most mainstream Priest album that there is, and a lot of people who didn't listen to metal, who are more in the rock scene and other music, enjoyed that one. But personally, it's not my favorite. Point of Entry, I think, is one of the lowest points in Priest's discography. There's not really any memorable tracks on it. But then you get to 1982 with Screaming for Vengeance, which is my favorite Judas Priest album. I think the whole track list on that album is phenomenal. I love the famous ones, the super popular songs like You've Got Another Thing Coming and The Hellion and Electric Eye, but I also like deep cuts like Bloodstone and Devil's Child and Riding on the Wind. So yeah, all around 10 out of 10, perfect album, and it's phenomenal. Go listen to it if you haven't in a while and you want a refresher or just go listen to it if you want something good to listen to. Defenders of the Faith came next in 1984, also a solid album. I like tracks like Love Bites and The Sentinel and Rock Hard Ride Free and Free Will Burning. Definitely a top 5 Priest album for me. Next in 1986 was Turbo. I don't really like too many of the songs off Turbo. There is one called Parental Guidance that I think really, encompasses what metal was at the time, like kids rebelling against their parents and things like that. So that track is fun for me. And also, Turbo Lover is a good track. But at the same time, I think that's when they kind of went for the more mainstream, like, synthesizer rock sound. So, but next in 1988 came Ram It Down. This is a top 3 Priest album for me. I really like Ram It Down. Their cover of Johnny Be Good is pretty cool, pretty heavy. And then tracks like the title track, and also heavy metal. So yeah, this is when the lead up to Painkiller, which everybody knows Painkiller. It's another 10 out of 10 album. It's phenomenal. So yeah, Painkiller, Hell Patrol, Between the Hammer and the Anvil, Nightcrawler, Leather Rebel, Metal Meltdown, all, like, just the entire the entire track list on Painkiller is just great. And then they started to go through some internal struggles after the release of Painkiller. A couple years after, I guess. Then their next album, they didn't actually have Halford on vocals anymore. It was Tim Ripper Owens, and they released Jugulator, which I think is one of the lowest points in their discography. It was released by a record label that I think dissolved, and that's why it's not on Apple Music or Spotify or any of the streaming services. So you have to go find it on YouTube if you want to check it out. But yeah, I mean, it's alright. It's solid, but it's definitely not one of the best. Out of the 2 Ripper albums, I like Demolition from 2001 better. There's just more memorable tracks on that one. On Demolition, like One on One. So yeah. Next is Angel of Retribution, which came out in 2005, and they had Halford back on vocals in that one. That one's solid. There's good ones like, what's it called? Judas Rising, and also Deal with the Devil. So yeah, that's a solid album. Next was Nostradamus in 2008. 2008 was also coincidentally the year I was born. But I do think Nostradamus is the worst Judas Priest record. It's too concept-y for me. A lot of the songs were too long, too drawn out for me. So I don't really enjoy that one. But next in 2014 was Redeemer of Souls, which is a solid album. Songs like Dragonaut and March of the Damned are really good tracks. And it was a good segue into their 2018 album Firepower, which everybody considers their return to form after Painkiller, and how they kind of got knocked out of the mainstream. Firepower is phenomenal. You should go check it out. And then obviously their 19th and most recent release last year was Invincible Shield in 2024. What an album. The fact that Halford and the rest of the band are able to stay up like that in their 70s and 60s. Halford's in his 70s, and I know he can still hit those notes, is just incredible. Top 3 album for me in terms of Judas Priest, and yeah, it's just 10 out of 10. In terms of being able to stay relevant and also stay good at being a musician and things like that with the vocal range of Halford, I saw Judas Priest last year in October, and I got to experience it firsthand. This is the shirt that I got at the tour. Well, not at the tour, because I saw them down in Loveland, Colorado, at a small stadium, and it was only about 8,000 people capacity, and so the merch line was all the way around the building. So that means I had to order this online later. It costed me a lot of money because of shipping and things like that, but it's a very sentimental shirt to me because Judas Priest is one of my favorite metal bands of all time. They really inspired me to play guitar, to listen to metal, so that's why I got the shirt. I also just like the artwork. I have not seen pink or purple on a metal shirt very often, so I think it's a super cool shirt. And the show was amazing too. Like I said, Halford can still really sing. He can hit those notes, and the atmosphere was super cool. So yeah. In terms of influences, in terms of me, Judas Priest was a big influence on me. When I first started getting metal, I was listening to Metallica and things like that. And then I listened to Painkiller, and I heard the guitar solo. And I feel like that song, especially that solo, was the main reason why I wanted to play electric guitar. Because at the time, I was playing acoustic guitar, and I wasn't really having that much fun. And then I heard that solo, and I said, I want to do that. So I did. I got an electric guitar for Christmas, and I started learning things like that, and I'm going to work my way up to playing that solo. Um, as such, I'm not very experienced yet with soloing, but I've been playing a lot of classic metal songs, so that is super fun. And yes, that song was definitely an inspiration to me. In terms of bands, they have been cited as influence by a lot of bands, especially like 80s and 90s thrash metal. So bands like Anthrax and Destruction, Exodus and Death Angel and Megadeth and Creator have cited Judas Priest as influence. Also, bands that kind of lean more towards death metal, like Testament and Sepultura and Possessed. Yeah, and also just bands in general that like thrash metal classics like Metallica and Megadeth and Voivod and Overkill. And then groove metal, even like Pantera, have all cited Judas Priest as influences, especially there's a band called Exciter, which are named after a Judas Priest song. Exciter is off of Stained Class, which came out in 1971. No, that's wrong. 1981. 78? One of those years with an 8 in them. Point being, they are named after a song. So obviously Judas Priest was a huge influence on Exciter's music. So that's pretty cool. They have also sold over 15 million records as of 2017, including 11 top 30 albums in the United Kingdom. The band had 11 consecutive albums to be certified gold or platinum by the RIAA in the United States, starting in 1977, and that's a pretty cool achievement, especially for a metal band. I feel like metal band doesn't get a lot of love in the mainstream, but I feel like Judas Priest accomplished that pretty well. They were a big progenitor of metal fashion, like around the release of Hellbent for Leather. They started it up like the leather and studs and motorcycles look. I know at early shows Halford would ride a motorcycle out onto the stage, and that must have been pretty cool to see, and I feel like a lot of bands definitely copied that. Speaking of Rob Halford, I think he is one of the most iconic metal vocalists, not just because of his voice, but also the fact that I'm pretty sure he's probably the most famous openly gay metal musician or person in the scene, and I think that's super cool because I know that he said at the time that he came out he was super scared of the reaction. People wouldn't like his music anymore, but I think that he also, he didn't get that reaction. Everybody was very supportive and things like that, and I think that's, all that people needed, because I feel like that sort of gets looked down on in music and in metal especially, and you should not judge a person's music by how they are in terms of political beliefs or sexuality or anything like that. I feel like if you like somebody's music, then go for it, listen to them, support them. You can disagree on other things and still like their music, so I think he is super iconic due to his voice and also his image. In terms of what they're doing now, I know that I said I saw them, and I think they're still touring in Europe. I believe they have a summer tour planned, but don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. Actually, let's just Google it real quick, shall we? They have 2 shows in Canada, one show in Canada, 1 show in Brazil in April. Oh, okay, a lot of shows in April. Okay, so they're still touring. They tour through the summer. I was right. So they tour through the summer for Invincible Shield, and then I bet they'll take a break because a lot of the band members are getting pretty up there in age, and they need a break. I think that a lot of people would love them to put out another record, and I think they've definitely said that they will. When commenting on the possibility of a 20th studio album, Halford said that there is definitely an inevitable chance that there'll be something else. So yeah, that's exciting. We get to have more Priest music hopefully in the future. But I also, at the same time, feel like that it's super hard to follow an album like Invincible Shield. I think that's a phenomenal album, and I don't think that many Priest fans will appreciate something as much as if it followed, a maybe lesser album, because I feel like following such a killer album is going to be really hard to, please everybody. But at the same time, it'd be fun to listen to more Priest and see him again on tour and stuff like that. So, that'll be cool. Yeah, that's where they're at right now. As I said, they're one of the most iconic metal bands of all time, or in my top 3 of all time, with top 3 bands, not even just metal, of my life, with AC/DC, Metallica. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this edition of, I don't know what to call this, Metal History, Metal Opinion, something like that. So, yeah, Have a nice day and see you.